to another episode of Conversations, the show where we have the conversations that maybe not enough people are having. And maybe if they did have more of them, we would see some more humanness in our businesses. And I'm excited about this topic today because we're talking about KPIs and conversations that maybe could help us create some KPIs that work a little bit better for us, that are actually performance indicators as opposed to just things that we can track. So for those of you who are not new to the show, you have heard me complain about KPIs a whole bunch of times. And I'm not one of those people who believes in complaining unless you have an intention of doing something about it. And it took me a minute to find who I consider to be the right guest for this conversation with me. And I'm very happy to have Chuck with me here today to have this conversation, because I believe that we're both equally frustrated, but also empowered to do something about the problem that is KPIs. So for those of you joining us live, as always, this is not just a conversation for Tracy and Chuck. It is a conversation for all of us. So if you have KPIs that you've run across that you don't consider performance indicators, or you've created metrics that maybe aren't working for you, or anything on the arena of KPIs in terms of questions, concerns, experience, thoughts, please share, because that makes our conversation all the more robust by having more brains working together to solve this problem, which is KPIs that don't matter. So before we get too far into the conversation, Chuck, can you let us know who you are and why having KPIs that matter is something that is important to you?
Well, hi, thank you. And we definitely need more brains on this because, it's too big a topic and I'm not sure that I'm, able to handle it. But I have been in manufacturing related businesses in one manner or another for 35 years. You can tell by the gray beard whiskers there. I am an industrial engineer by education, and I have done about everything in a manufacturing organization that you can do. From sweep the floor, drive a forklift, run a CNC machine, sell it, build it, ship it, receive it, set up an ERP system, market it. I have done about everything you can do except be an accountant, a buyer, and a human resources person, but I have had them work for me. So I have a view of it top to bottom, but truly sales and marketing is my love. That's what I do. I am currently with an ERP consultant in the dynamic space, Turnkey Technologies, and also primarily manufacturing related, particularly in defense area, medical device area. That is where we focus.
Awesome. And so, Chuck, in our original conversation, we got to talking about metrics. So in the world of manufacturing, is our measuring the wrong things also sometimes a problem? Because I will tell you, in sales and marketing, it's a huge problem.
Yeah, in sales and marketing, it's a massive problem. I think that in the world of manufacturing, they certainly typically do a better job in general. The lean thinking mentality from the Toyota manufacturing system that was popularized really got people thinking in the right direction. And there's certain things in manufacturing that are kind of no-brainers, like, on-time delivery. What's my conformance? What's my compliance? These types of things. However, I do think that there can be a tendency to overmeasure in manufacturing, because depending on what you're manufacturing, if you're working on something that's incredibly costly, okay, small issues can become big, expensive problems, and they can heavily impact customer experience. If you're building one airplane, okay, one compliance issue can really cause you some major delays. That's different. If you're making things that are going out and they're costing a quarter of a penny, you're literally throwing stuff in the trash. And I'll give you an example that's not a measurement. I worked for a company, Coaxis, my great friends, and they're in the RF cable assembly space. And we would make cable assemblies, and a lot of the parts were made of gold. Okay. So you think, ooh, gold. And if you walk around their factory, you'll see in the cracks of the floor a whole bunch of gold parts stuck in there. But they're gold. You've got to get them. It's like mining. the cost of those gold-plated parts is ridiculously low.
Mm.
It can be as low as a penny. And so if I start to cost and measure my scrap on some of these parts, it might lead me to do silly behaviors like put a person down on their hands and knees to try and pull those parts up out of the cracks, put them onto a bench, try and discern what the heck they are. I got news for you. I spent more time getting them down onto their knees and back up again. So I literally said, I was like, let's cover it over with clear epoxy once all the cracks are full. Let's have gilded floors. And man, people will love to come visit our place. And so that's a kind of an over exaggerated example. I mean, you know what we did. We didn't measure it. Okay. We incorporated a certain amount of scrap, a certain amount of loss, just like you would if you were in the food business.
Right.
Okay. There's going to be some loss. It might be for compliance issues. It might be that the cold chain wasn't maintained for a certain period of time. And so, sorry, it has to go. Or truly some of it is just unsaleable and is spoiled or is no longer aesthetically pleasing depending on the destination. Okay. So this is the kind of thing you just cost in. So, but overall, I think in manufacturing, they do a pretty good job. Sales and marketing, it goes to hell real quick.
Well, and this is one of the things I'm thinking about based on your story, Chuck, is that, okay, if I'm making a plane and I need to stay on a budget, I need to be responsible to my board and all of these things, then I'm probably I probably care a little bit more about tracking the things that matter because I want to make sure that I don't spend an extra $1 billion on this. But in sales and marketing, especially with all of the digital sales and marketing technology that's available, the cost is actually quite small. So is that one of the problems that you see in people choosing KPIs that matter? Because they're like, well, this cost is mostly negligible anyway, so meh.
I have heard that so many times. It's only insert whatever word or phrase you want to put there. It's only 30 seconds. It's only this. It's only that. Yes, that is the equivalent of tiny little gold parts in the crack of the floor. It can be. But on the flip side, depending on the situation, and that's why we have human intelligence, not artificial intelligence, is that 30 seconds that happens 10,000 times a year adds up really, really quickly. And that's where we have to make some judgment calls as to what there is to what the reality is and what we measure. And I want to scrap this whole word KPIs.
Let's do
certainly
it.
for
I hate
the
it
purpose
too.
of this conversation. And people are using OKRs, objective.
Oh yeah.
No.
It's the same thing.
EPIs, effective performance indicators.
Ooh. And I think this, yeah.
Key is subjective. Key to whom? Are we going to have the CFO picking sales KPIs? Are we going to have the CRO picking cash flow KPIs? No, it doesn't make sense. But I think we can all agree that if we first come at this from a perspective of being actually effective, okay, so just change the name. It's not about what's the right name for what we're intending. It's about what's actually going to change people's brains about how they think about it. And I'm going with EPIs.
I like that because a lot of times one of the problems that I have with KPIs historically is that they're just a metric, right? So they're in marketing. Common one is like, how many views did you get on the thing, right? How many engagements? And it doesn't look at what was the process of getting the thing there, right? So how many hours? I did this breakdown once in an article I wrote on LinkedIn. So if anybody's looking for it, I can try and find it for you. But it was based on like, okay, so I was the VP of marketing at the time. We had someone who spent like 8 hours writing a blog. And then I would review the blog and then they would update the blog and then they would post the blog. And between all of this, you're looking at like at least 10 hours of corporate time that goes into this, right? And then we're like, 4 people looked at this. One, we didn't try to pay attention to whether or not those 4 people were internal marketing employees, making sure that it got posted properly. But there was a whole bunch of time, effort, and energy that went into doing that, that almost never turned into business. And I think these are the things when we look at it, like, okay, what does it cost? We have our website platform, right? We pay for that because we're going to have a website, right? So we have the blog. So we might as well write it because we have the functionality. But to some degree, I think this is then like, how can we create work for somebody? But the work doesn't actually contribute to anything. So then we have a whole bunch of people who are just doing work that doesn't contribute. And at the end of the day, does that feel good? I mean, it didn't feel good for me.
Well, when I think about that one in particular, and there is a tendency for folks to try and get down to, and I'm not suggesting that's what this is an example of, but which blog article was the one that created? Now, types of content may have a tendency to create more interest, web traffic, that sort of thing. But which is the one? And how many hours did it take? And then how many hours does it take to figure that out? So what's your cost of your of maintaining your KPI when you should be looking at an EPI? In truth, the blog program has a great deal of merit to it. So for instance, one of the things that will probably come up in here is sales velocity. Okay. If you go out and you find sales velocity, it's well understood to be a great metric for effectivity in your sales organization, your revenue organization. The first link in the search results is going to go to HubSpot. Okay. Why? Because HubSpot created literally a massive amount of relevant content. Their expertise, authority, and trust, EAT in Google terms, is very, very high. So their search engine performance is very, very high. So creating a lot of this relevant blog material is really, really important. But they created a massive amount. You need to have a rate of production. And there's a balance. How fast can you get it out versus what is the value of it? And I don't like to use the word quality because quality is overused. We have a quality output. We have a quality product. You better. Quality is your ticket to the game. It doesn't mean you're going to win. So it's not that. What is the result? Okay. The result is our SERP, search engine ranking, is going to be high now. Look, it's quantifiable. It's qualitative. Overall, we're now on the first page because of this effort. Not Google ads, not keywords, that sort of thing. So is the blog effort doing something? I hope that the blog effort is going to create revenue. It sure as hell better create revenue. But here you go. I've already mentioned HubSpot. I have been a HubSpot user. I'm not currently a HubSpot user. We're a Dynamics 365 partner. That's our CRM marketing platform. But that word of mouth gives credibility to HubSpot. Clearly, they have expertise, authority, and trust. So that effort matters. So how do we measure that? Well, we have to work backwards. What is our goal? Is our goal to create blogs, or is our goal expertise, authority, and trust? All right.
Yeah.
And then from there, what do we need to do that? Well, we need to create valuable content. We need to do it how often before we believe, because we won't know, that there's going to be measurable output, measurable results. And then we've got to back into that. And that is the way the EPI, aka KPI effort, should always go. What is the end result going to be? Work yourself backward, not, well, I'm used to doing this.
Right. And I think in this work back procedure is sometimes where these things get broken, right? Because we think about it from I extrapolate that if I do this, it could generate X, right? So if I write a whole bunch of blog posts, it could create expertise and trust, right? Like, sure, it can. But is it? Right? And I think that's where a lot of, again, even if we're talking about effective performance indicators, right? Like, are we tracking on that? And then also, where do we bonus people? Because I feel like this is another big piece of the performance metrics conversation, is that we're going to say these are our performance metrics. We're going to bonus people on these things, right? You do. And so it's always confused me, quite honestly, especially in sales, right? Like, isn't commission how I'm awarding your performance, right? Like, you sell a thing, I give you money by doing that. And it's, I mean, I worked in an organization at one point who would give the sales reps $50 gift cards every time they hit their weekly quota of 125 calls. But the 125 calls were not tracking to business, right? So they were doing them, and then they were not getting any meetings. They were not closing any business. So then you have this whole problem of taking away a perk that you've given to someone, because now you're saying, well, actually, it looks like number of calls you make in a week isn't an effective performance indicator. Right? It's not showing us that we're going to close business. So we need to go back to the drawing board and look at something else. How have you seen that transformation happen? Because I think people get like really ingrained in like, I believe that this is the thing that will do it, even though the data says to them that it's not.
Well, I love that one, because I have been tracked on activity metrics in the past, and I have tracked people on the activity metrics in the past, and I will continue to, but it's got a different spin on it. Let's think about it this way. Well, I have to make sure people are doing something, so I need to know how many calls they're making. Okay, because I have a belief that that's going to result in revenue, and the truth be told, it is. However, is it going to be, I'm an industrial engineer. We're all about effectiveness. We're all about, and I don't like to use the word efficiency either, because it's not always just about efficiency. Sometimes you want to spend some money so you can be more effective, but sometimes it's just inefficient. Okay. So they're different. But if you think about activities, more activities are good, right? What if I told you I actually want to see the number of activities per $1 million of realized revenue going down? So if I have a rep who has kind of maxed out the amount of activity that they can do in a week, month, year, effectively, but their revenue is going up, say their activity is flat and their revenue is going up, and it's a long-term trend, or their activity is actually going down and their revenue is going up, there's only two explanations: pure luck, or they're getting better over time. Well, either way, I want to spend some time understanding what it is they're doing, because if it's pure luck, it's going to be very obvious. And if it's because they're getting better over time, I want to learn from them so I can use that to make other people better over time.
Yeah.
Now, if you take that one step further, well, if I know how many selling activities it takes to get $1 million in revenue, and I want to grow the business, if I'm going to grow the business on just purely adding salespeople, and if that's an isolated case, then that tells me how many new selling activities I need to grow $1 million. So how many selling man hours do I need? It's pretty simple arithmetic. Now, the reality is that it's somewhat more cloudy than that, because you can increase demand creation activities, and you can increase that, and you might be able to keep that revenue flat. So overall, it's what is the attribution for revenue on inbound, and what is the attribution for revenue on outbound? And I'm going to take you right back to that HubSpot example in terms of an EPI. I'll ask you the question: how did you first hear of HubSpot?
I don't know that I even know.
I do. The first time I heard of HubSpot was because I was a user. I joined a company and we had HubSpot. But from the beginning of this conversation, that search that I did for sales velocity might lead a marketer or someone to incorrectly assume that I learned about HubSpot from SEO.
Right.
Or that it was because I did a web search. If the very next thing that I do is say, well, I need a demo for HubSpot. Well, that's pure coincidence.
Right.
You have to ask me. The reason that I know about HubSpot is because I was a user before. If you measure last touch attribution, then you're going to mistakenly assume it's because of web search and SEO. So you're going to spend more money on SEO, when in fact, you should be spending on more things that encourage word of mouth. Okay. Social proof, that sort of thing, to actually create demand. Because I might not have heard it as an employee, but that is essentially word of mouth.
Right.
The sales manager told me, oh, I'm using HubSpot and it does this for me. Great. I'm using Microsoft Dynamics CRM and it does this for me. Okay. It allows me to leverage my tools, my existing Microsoft Office and Modern Workplace tools, to further integrate things like Teams and use customizations and Power Platform and that sort of thing. That's the story someone's going to say is, oh, you're using Office? You really ought to consider Dynamics CRM, because it just grows the value of your investment in Microsoft Office tools and Modern Workplace tools that you already have. That word of mouth is crucial. That's where I might want to spend my time. So asking people, how'd you hear it? How'd you hear about us? Actually asking every time. Now roll up that data. That's more effective, because it's last touch is fine, but you really want to know about first touch. Where am I going to spend my money? That's back to that blog thing. Where am I going to spend my money? Is 10 hours a blog going to cut it? Is there other ways to do it where we can generate the same revenue? And all of that has to be, it's intense data gathering and measuring, but it's what has to be done.
Well, and I think what I'm hearing for you, Chuck, is this level of intentionality, right? And an intentional investment in making sure that what we're tracking matters. And not just saying we're going to track things because we should track things. Right? We're saying, like, we want to, our goal here, all of us, is to increase the revenue of the business. This is why we're in business, right? We want to increase the revenue, help more people, however you want to employ more people, right? However you want to look at this. But we don't stay in business unless we're making money. And so we need to do that. This is how we can do that. This is how we can create word of mouth. This is how we're going to try to do it. And we're going to see, like, does this actually create word of mouth? Does this give us the digital influence that we're trying to achieve? Does it give us the level of sales revenue that we're looking to achieve? And I think too, one of the things I always end up coming back to is like the people behind the numbers.
There we go.
If we're trying to create word of mouth, how do we do that? Like the people have to want to some degree. Am I right?
You're totally right. And I love that you brought it back to the people, because there's the intentionality and there's the unintended intentionality. So AKA the consequences. Bring it back to manufacturing. I can have a spectacular on-time delivery performance. In the background, I'm proverbially beating people with sticks left and right. Oh, I'm making them feel better by buying them breakfast or giving them free coffee. Okay. But I'm making their life miserable. But our on-time delivery record's spectacular. What's the unintended consequence? Well, my Glassdoor reviews suck. So I'm going to have a hard time getting new talent, which in the long run is going to affect my on-time delivery. So your intentionality is important. Were the consequences of beating people with proverbial sticks part of your intentions? And you have to look at it from a holistic perspective. Everybody knows cause and effect. They just ignore it when it comes to KPIs. They straight up ignore it. What are the unintended consequences of this? I can get this number. I can get the activity number. I can give people gift cards. That happens in both manufacturing and it happens in selling. It happens in people give them to customers. Okay. But what are the unintended consequences? Low probability of win. Long-term sustainability suffers. Our ability to hire new talent suffers. Eventually that gets out onto the street, and we have a reputation for being SOBs, and nobody wants to work with us.
Not sustainable.
It's completely not sustainable. And I love that sustainability has like 7 definitions.
Right.
Because it's so important.
You know what? I always find this equally hilarious about authenticity, because authenticity has like all of the definitions as well. We can create definitions out our ears, and it still is what it is, right? And it's funny because I've worked with salespeople who have like severe anxiety because they're so stressed out about hitting their number, and they are trying to hit a specific commission point too, but the number that they're trying to hit actually prevents them from selling, but they have to do that because otherwise they're going to get fired. And part of this other live series called The Digital Download, we were talking last week about the mental health in sales, and we don't think about these things, right? We just give people numbers and we're like, make it work. Like, this is your job, right? This is your job. Come be a robot, generate these things. And at the end of the day, that's all we need you to do. But the people who really want to come and like make their contribution and do the things that matter to them and also that matter to the business, it's not necessarily so well defined, right? As saying like, it's as easy as making 125 calls a week. Quite honestly, if it was that easy, every single organization would just do that. Right? So I think there's also this important to look at the unique DNA of your organization to say like, this is our culture, this is where we're going, and the EPIs need to take into consideration those things as well, instead of just like opening a book and saying, oh, book ABC says that we should make 125 calls a week, so we should make 125 calls a week. I mean, you could try it, right? But if you try it and it doesn't work, then I think this is my biggest frustration point with KPIs, is that if it doesn't, it's not tracking it, right? Whether it's an effective performance indicator or a key performance indicator, whatever you want to, performance metrics, call it what you want. But if it's not tracking towards your goal, then we need to go back to the drawing board and try something else.
And I think that the disconnect becomes, what am I going to do if the numbers are off track?
Right.
And the answer is almost always more and faster. That is a bunch of leaders who don't have any clue or any ideas. Because the whole purpose of an EPI or a KPI or an OKR or whatever the heck you want to call it, the whole purpose is, what am I going to do to make it improve? If I'm just going to measure it and I'm not going to do anything to make improvement, then I'm wasting cost measuring it. Who cares? I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
It literally just gives someone a job and it wastes money that could best be spent creating value some other way, either to you or your customer, preferably your customer. So what are you going to do if your on-time delivery is off? You're going to measure the reason why your on-time delivery is off. And then you're going to use the Pareto principle to tackle the ones that are creating the biggest problem, until you get down to a point where the cost effectiveness of solving the problem is not, the math doesn't work. It's more expensive to solve the problem than it is to deal with it. That's rarely the case in on-time delivery, by the way. I can see it in other things, but not in on-time delivery.
I was going to say, but I think this is an interesting thing to pay attention to as well, right? Because, okay, let's put this out there. I want to have a conversation about it. If we're tracking something and we're tracking off on it, and we start to explore, like, why are we tracking off? And we get to that point where we're like, no, this whole investigation isn't worth the time for how much we're off. Is that the thing we're off on? Is that an effective performance indicator? Because if we get to the point where we're like, this doesn't matter that this is off, is that an indicator that the number is also doesn't really matter?
No, you have two things. You can either stop measuring it or find something else to measure. It is an indicator that it doesn't matter. It's only one of those two things. It's not worth it economically, or it's not the right thing. If it makes me feel better, that doesn't mean a thing.
And I mean, I always think, right, like, so I used to play a competitive basketball, and I would always, like, I always wanted to know how many points I scored, right? But how many points I scored matters a whole bunch less if we lose the game, right? Like, if we lost, I don't really, it's nice that I scored 27 points, but like, it was irrelevant because we didn't win. And I mean, when you're playing adult sports, nobody is like, okay, so these are the things we need to do coming out of this. And so I always think, like, if you want to track a thing for yourself because you think it's meaningful to you, or you're trying to learn, maybe you're new in a role and you're trying to figure out your process. Is this common with salespeople, right? That's like, perfect. Okay, I'm going to do these things, see how they play out. Are they correlated? Are they not correlated? This is great because this is you like optimizing your Eunice in your role, right? Like, what do I need to do to make this happen? But when it's like a dictated number, how do you feel, Chuck, about like as a new employee, let's say, and let's say you're like, I'm going to just go back to sales because I feel like it's the easiest example for me. You're a sales rep and you've been in sales for 20 years and you've been doing your thing for 20 years, which is what made you successful at sales. Now you've gone to work for this other organization, maybe a different industry, perhaps, and they're like, this is how we sell. And you look at it and you're like, that's not how I sell. What's the importance of what I'm thinking of is like even just a space for that conversation, right? Because I feel like a lot of times numbers and metrics are those things that are kind of just, we're not going to talk about it. Someone's just going to tell us what they are, and I'm just going to do it, even if I don't think that it works.
Well, if you're a new employee and you've gone somewhere and they're giving you metrics and you don't like it, you only have two choices. You can leave, or you can, if it's feasible. In selling, it's more feasible because you have a CRM. And the whole point of the CRM is to capture data. And so you can do your own metrics. It's not because, I'm better than you. You can have a conversation and say, oh, well, your numbers are down. Yes, but my revenue is up. That's an anomaly. How do we explain that? You can have that conversation. And there are stories of those managers and supervisors and leaders who go, oh, I don't care. And that doesn't make me look good. And then they take it out on you. And then you can, once again, you have two choices. And actually three in that case. You're a salesperson. You're in the job of convincing them. In which case, the data that you have is crucial. And as salespeople, what do? We ask questions. That's what the data does for you. It sets you up to ask questions. It's why. Well, not in the toddler sense. Why? If you become that person, God help us all, right? But a thinking organization, a thinking leader needs to be responding to those questions. If what you're telling me is true, but the data that I'm collecting is telling a different story, does it make sense for us to investigate that? And then your third choice is, well, this person is telling me no. Well, you're going to lose your job anyway if you're in that situation. So you might as well go tell the CEO. Honestly. I mean, what's the point? You convince them, leave, or tell the CEO because maybe you can make things better. Not to punish anyone, just because look at what I learned. Look at how interested I am in your success, in our mutual success. Who doesn't want an employee like that?
And I mean, I would say nobody, although the market would say that there are lots of companies who don't want those people because they don't like to be challenged, right? And so I'm thinking, like, this is the thing that I've seen, right? Like, people know that the KPIs, in air quotes for those of you who are just listening, because they're not key, they're just numbers. The having to meet the KPI actually hinders you from accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
And I guess at the end of the day, it really comes down to if we know that, if I, as an individual salesperson or as an individual contributor at any level, know that what I'm doing here, because you've told me I have to, is stopping me from doing what matters, then like I'm the only one who sees that, maybe. Right?
It's true.
So then it's like to some degree my responsibility to talk about it, to bring it up. And it might be, I think a lot of people are concerned that that's going to be challenging authority or like punishable by being fired. And a lot of people have that experience, right? So it's not necessarily wrong. But what is the detriment to ourselves and to the organization when we don't bring that information forward when we have it?
The detriment to ourselves is that we're belying who we are, first of all. You are going to just become increasingly miserable. And it's not good for your mental health. Sometimes it's not good for your physical health. It may not be good for your family. I mean, my wife, I just adore her, and she lets me vent. And there's times when it's too often,
Mm.
and it becomes all about me, 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 me. Usually when I'm tired and I'm not sleeping, right? And
For me,
then,
it's when I'm hungry.
oh,
Just
there you
like
go.
I'm no dice if I'm hungry.
Yeah, I'm never hungry. Look at these chins. I mean, come on. I but so it's not good for you. So there are a lot of consequences to that, and it's as human beings, we live in the short term 80% of our day. We say we believe in the long term, but we just live and act in the short term. And so we continue to do these things that aren't good for us. Going back to marketing, and organizationally, the organization does the same exact thing. We live in the short term. One of the things is MQLs.
Mm.
There's literally a phrase, it's called the MQL hamster wheel. And people have heard it. It's becoming popularized, except the people who don't believe that it's a thing. They haven't learned that yet. And it incentivizes the wrong behavior, right? So get me 10,000 MQLs. That way I can exercise all my salespeople to go out and call them so that I can get a 0.2% conversion rate. Well, that is a lot of time and money wasted that could have been spent creating value for the employees or preferably customers. Or I could be repurposing and experimenting and doing things that create inbound demand where people raise their hand and want to say, I don't want your product, I want you. Well, now my conversion rate might be 25 or 40%, and I don't need near the staff. So my revenue may grow at a higher rate, or even if it's not quite a higher rate, my costs are lower. And so often we talk about revenue. We want revenue to be the driver. We want revenue to be the driver. Haha, no. Industrial engineers weighing in. You actually want profit to be your driver. Now, we talk in terms of gross profit. Why? Because there's certain things that are out of our control, like taxes, right? There's nothing we can do about that. Okay. So really, I would say we want to back up all the way to gross profit, in which case, can I grow the revenue at a rate and keep the staff at a rate and do the investments in the activities at a rate that increases my gross profit at acceptable pace? That is really quite a bit more important. So for the organization, that's what we sacrifice. Revenue, MQLs. That's what we've got to do. There's my chihuahua barking. She thinks somebody's coming in.
Or she's just chiming in and she agrees with you.
She's an industrial engineer too.
There you go.
But the organization thinks like the people. They think like the people. They're so focused on the short term that they don't put enough time, effort, energy, and really productive thought into the long term. And so what's really best for the health of the organization? What's best for the health of the organization is balancing the revenue and the cost so that we become more effective.
And I think that this is an important thing. I actually remember, so when I was working in client success and I created a project for myself where I'm gonna look at, like, we're tracking our time for these things, right? So I'm gonna look at the revenue from each project and the time spent on each project and see which of these accounts are profitable. And most of them were, except one of them like really wasn't. We were like losing money every single time this company ran a campaign. And so, but the thing that was always interesting, I might have shared this on the show before, but one of the things I did, so I went to the campaign manager and I said, this is us throwing away money every single time we run this campaign. I get, like, to this point, we haven't done the analysis, so we didn't know that. That's fair. And on a go forward basis, if we can't do this project in 4 hours, we need to consider getting rid of this client because we are losing money on every single campaign. And it was awesome because she took that away and then like a week later came back with this solution that would allow her to do everything she needed to do in 4 hours for a campaign. And I was like, this is the thing, the coming back to the people bit of it, right? So like, yes, this is what the numbers are saying. And when we empower the people to solve the problem and say, like, literally, you know more about this account than anybody else in this organization. If anybody is capable of solving this problem, it's you. take it away and show me what you got. I'm not going to try and fix it. I have no idea how to fix this. Right. And if you don't think we can, then we'll talk about it. But like, take it away. And when you have people that do have that, okay, now I see, I didn't know before, let's make this work. I really want to be able to support this client still. Let's find a way to make it work. They do, right? But in the opposite scenario where you're just like, sell more of these. And you're like, this would actually be a terrible plan for us to sell more of these because it hurts the business on the profit level. And again, I think it's just something that the numbers are triggers and the people are the drivers, right? The people are the ones who are showing up and doing the things. So almost always, it always makes me think this too. And like very early on in my career, I worked for a retail furniture company. And I was friends with some of the guys who were in the fleet. So would do the furniture deliveries. And I remember having this conversation with them once about all of the things that were broken in the scheduling system. And it would be better if this and this, and we only need 2 people for these types of deliveries, but they give us 3 and blah, blah. And I said to them, I'm like, why don't you tell the VP this, right? Like, you should talk to the VP with this feedback. And they were like, oh no, we're not allowed to talk to the VP. And I was like, okay, well, another part of the process that's broken. But again, it's kind of the narrative of I get numbers, I do things, instead of we are here to do something as a team, and let's find the best way to do that as a team.
Well, 2 things pop in my mind when you say that. There's an old equation: outcome equals event plus reaction. Okay. I can't control the event, but my reaction to it is what can change the outcome. And what you described there is very much that situation. And it also comes back to something that I believe in, again, industrial engineer here. That's why I call myself a revenue engineer. You know, it's because it's about improving the process over time. And even in selling and whatever it is, whether I've been in manufacturing, an industrial engineer, a seller, a marketer, it's always about improving the process. And you have to be a systems thinker. We're losing money on that, scrap it. No, we're losing money on that because it takes us 10 hours. Therefore, we're not making enough money. Can we come up with a framework if we create a system that will make it more effective, in this case, actually more efficient, because the outcome is worth it? Well, yes, the outcome is worth it. It's revenue. It's when we can't make it more efficient, if we can't make it more effective and save that time, that it becomes not worth it. So you become a systems thinker. You try and solve it by design, right? I create a framework. That's when I create automation. So many people, they try and automate everything first. Garbage in, garbage out. Now I'm just going to have faster production of garbage. And who wants that?
This is a huge problem in sales.
It's a huge problem in everything, right? I'm going to automate first. No. Get a good process first, then automate that. Then you can derive additional savings. And the same thing happens in business processes as it does in physical manufacturing or anything else. But you need to become a systems thinker. In addition to being an industrial engineer, the Leader's Handbook by Peter Schultes is a great manual for that. And side note, one of the greatest things in there that I will never forget is the flaw in the theory of carrots and sticks. Give someone a carrot, they'll come toward the carrot. Whack them on the ass and they'll move away from the stick. Well, they have a picture, and you look it up on the internet, do the search, theory of carrots and sticks. It's a donkey with a carrot tied in front of him and somebody whacking him on the butt with a stick, usually a farmer. The flaw in the theory of carrots and sticks is there's a jackass in the middle. And your employees aren't. And to your point, if you give them the opportunity to weigh in, to have a say, to be creative, and empower them to be a systems thinker, then you can solve these problems more often than not by making them more effective, maybe more efficient, and maintain and find new prosperity out of your current situation before you were just going to abandon it. Because that's the first thing. I'll give you another example of exactly the thing that happened. Real life happened in my life. My son's a computer science student at Lehigh University. He's killing it. He's doing great. Amazing school. I'm an alumnus there. You ever have the opportunity for your kid to go where you went to school? I say go for it. And but it's very expensive, very, very expensive. And I said, Kevin, you're going to have way too much debt. I'm not comfortable with it. This is around COVID time. I think you ought to consider looking at your other options. I know you're already there, but you got to look at your other options because this is the outcome, this much debt. It costs you nothing to explore except your time. I said, so mine was, we're going to get out and get you out of Lehigh University. That's my alma mater. That's the last thing I wanted to happen. My son became a systems thinker and he solved the problem. He was already in school. Scholarship time is past, right? That ship sunk. It didn't sail, it sunk. Not in Kevin's eyes. He became a systems thinker and he solved the problem and he found a scholarship that covered the last 2.5 years. So now what we thought was going to be an abandonment became something very profitable for him and his future and his career. And that was, I don't agree with Dad's premise. I'm going to see if I can solve this systematically. And he did. He didn't believe that he was limited. He believed in infinite possibilities. So he went out and he found it. All of that applies to everything you do in business. If you believe in the infinite possibilities and you're a systems thinker, you say, okay, let's erase the whiteboard, just take a minute and brainstorm on this. Let's drop all of our preconceived notions and see if we can succeed by design. And you'll end up succeeding in that exact example like you did, like you gave. Apparently on multiple episodes of your show.
I feel like I talk about these things all the time. I don't know if it's on a podcast or the show or my show or someone else's show. It is what it is. If you've heard it before, you're welcome for hearing it again.
Well, the best message is bear repeating. They bear repetition. It could be a new audience or, people need to absorb it again because they didn't fully digest it the first time.
It's true. Okay, I want to go as a kind of a wrapping up thoughts here. I want to go back to this concept of infinite. I know the time goes by really fast on the show.
Yeah, right.
Also, I want to go back to infinite possibilities. One, because your background's got infinite possibilities written all over it. Not literally if you're listening, but it looks like infinite possibilities. So what is the risk from a corporation perspective of empowering our employees in this design thinking, infinite possibilities mentality?
The perceived risk is that we lose control. And for so many people, a corporation is never uncomfortable. A corporation is an entity, but people can become very uncomfortable with that. Probably from some place of insecurity or whatever. I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But I think there's that risk. Beyond that, truly, I don't see one. Now, these things can get out of control. But you said we've got to spend time doing that, and now you're just feeding the beast. So there is that risk. It can and should be measured. Your systems thinking should be effective. If we take the time to continuously erase the whiteboard every day, all of a sudden our costs to consider our improvements got out of control. In my 35 years, that's the only two I can think of. Is that it can become a beast of its own, or I might become insecure because I can't be a micromanager anymore.
Yeah, that was the one that was coming up for me, is that I think a lot of times KPIs and the numbers are tied into the control, right? So I'm going to force you to do 125 calls and I get to hold you accountable for doing that, even though I don't know that it's going to get the results that we want, right? And I can fire you based on that because I've said this is a performance metric for your job. And there's like so much fear that comes with that, right? There's like fear on the leadership side, there's fear on the employee side, and that realm of infinite possibilities is a transformation into an arena of experimentation and exploration and systems thinking and all of these things that maybe people don't have or haven't had the time to explore and become good at yet. So yes, there's a velocity ramp up time period. But if we don't have it, let's flip the question. If we don't have that, what's the bigger risk to the organization when we don't have it?
Well, you're going straight up, you're going to fail. It may not be immediately, but you're going to fail. For organizations that are small SMBs, I think that they fail to recognize that the reason that they got their start is because of the knowledge, the passion, and the energy of the founder. They do. At some point, the founder can't do everything, and the founder needs to transfer responsibility. But he or she may not be an expert in all areas. For instance, you may be a founder who is an accountant, and you may not have any concept of sales and marketing, but you still think like an accountant, okay? Which is not a knock on all accountants, insert all of the, footnotes.
I love my accountant, by the way, because otherwise I'd have to do my own accounting.
Exactly. But if you have one that only thinks that way and you're stuck in that mindset, then you're going to have a hard time pulling out of it. And when it comes time to transfer that responsibility, you're not going to understand the results. You'll become uncomfortable with the results, and you have to pull back to what's comfortable, even if it's ineffective. Long term, and if it's ineffective, it's going to fail. You're not growing your business. You don't have a brand that is energizing anyone. You're not inspiring anyone. You're just about the numbers. Well, when it comes time to sell your business, you may not be a saleable business. Oh, I'm just going to sell my business. Oh, what do you mean it's not saleable if it looks like this? I have worked for a business that tried to go through an acquisition. It was not a saleable business. My friend Damon Pistolka from Exit Your Way, that is what he does for a living. And I've learned more from having conversations with Damon as well about what makes a business saleable, and the fact that there are so many that, I'll just sell it. No, you have to have a willing buyer. So the possibility of failure is very real. And I think that's the risk. You have to empower people, and you have to allow the organization to survive your attrition or the attrition of anyone else. And that comes from empowering the people, from having the infinite possibilities that your way may not be the right way.
And I just see this as a big piece of we're not here specifically to talk about scaling, but when I look at those companies that have been able to scale, it's not ever been about like, okay, now I'm going to hire a whole bunch of people who think exactly like me so we can keep doing the exact same thing, right? It's people who add dimension to the conversation, who add a new perspective. So you can see like, oh, I can see that as a challenge. I didn't see that before because this is my perspective. So how can we, knowing that we're all here to go there together, and as we add team members, it evolves the DNA of the organization, right? It's not solely the owner anymore who is participating in the brand experience and the value of the organization. So how are we harnessing this genius to go together farther instead of controlling the genius to a degree where the genius, I don't think it ceases to exist in the individual, but it ceases to exist in how they show up for your organization. And then pretty soon, anybody who was there in the first place to go somewhere with you, and you're not allowing them to go there with you, is gonna leave, right?
They're gonna leave.
Yeah. Or they're gonna quiet quit, or either way, they're not there serving your organization to their highest potential. So you're not getting the best of them. They don't get to show up as their best selves every day. And this is not a winning formula.
Well, and there's a quote that I'm going to butcher because my memory is getting older by the minute. Essentially, leaders grow people, people grow businesses. And I think that's really crucial. I think it's really crucial to understand that the consequence, if you don't grow the people, is crucial. And you talk about you're not going to hire 100 people who believe what you believe or think what you think. I don't want to hire a bunch of people that think what I think or think the way that I think. I'd want to have a mix of left brain thinkers and right brain thinkers and people who are creatives and people who can make mental connections and put things together in ways that I can't. It's not people that think the way I think. But if we do share some set of our core passions, if we do share some set of our core beliefs, and those beliefs happen to be something about which we're passionate, then we're really going to excel. I think it was Simon Sinek says, if you give people a job, they'll work for your money. If you hire people for a job, they'll work for your money. If you hire people who believe what you believe, they'll work for you with blood, sweat, and tears. And that's really what it comes down to. And all of this feeds back to an attitude that comes back to KPIs, EPIs, OKRs. It does. Because if you're that type of person, if you have that kind of thinking, you're simply not going to approach KPIs the same way.
Absolutely. It's funny that you brought that back, because that's where I was going with the wrap up as well, is that there's a relationship between people and numbers. Numbers have an impact on people. People have an impact on numbers. We can't treat them as separate entities. They work together, and sometimes they're working together and sometimes they're working against each other. And if we can pay attention to when they're working against the people and create space for systems thinking, infinite possibilities to explore how the people and the numbers have a different relationship to each other that are taking us closer to our goal, then we have some secret sauce that we can actually grow based on.
We do.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Chuck, thank you so much. So many amazing insights. I have many notes that I'm taking away. I hope our audience had many notes as well. I was very involved in the talk, and I did a terrible job at posting the comments as we went. So thank you, Gordon and Samina, for being very active in the chat. And my apologies to you for sharing what you did, and for me being too far engrossed in the conversation to share your comments. They were all very wonderful. Thank you, Chuck, for your marvelous expertise. Chuck, where is the best place for people to find you if they want to learn more about you and what you do and have maybe some design thinking conversations?
Well, most definitely LinkedIn. I'm very prolific. Feel free to connect, reach out. I make a point to meet with every single person with whom I connect. My schedule is filled up almost every day with at least one networking meeting, and I think it's really important. So I do want to meet you just so that I can see how I can help you, and that is the best place to find me. Chuck Coxhead, Coxhead on LinkedIn. Trust me, there aren't a lot of us in the world.
And he is also linked in this in the post that was related to this live, so you can just click on that and you'll know who it is.
Or click that.
That's the easiest thing to do. Get connected, stay in the conversation. As I always say, this isn't going through a transformation on KPIs. If maybe your KPIs, again in air quotes, are challenging for you today, doesn't happen because of one, albeit very insightful, conversation between Chuck and Tracy. It happens because you make that conversation a priority and you stay in the conversation. So stay in the conversation, whether it's with Chuck or me or each other in the chat or some other thought partner that you love to have conversations with. Stay in the conversation, because I think there's a long way for us to go on the relationship between numbers and people. And if more of us start today, then we're on our way.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, everybody. And until next time, permission to do you.